So I guess we're just talking about the idea of how streetwear connects to everything, and culture connects to everything. And you're saying your art is really influenced by its connection to streetwear. We talk about that.
Yeah, so I think that, I mean, I grew up like, really interested in streetwear. Like, I remember Bape was like a really big, I could never like buy it because I couldn't afford it, but it
What
was
year?
like,
What year?
oh man, like early 2000s.
Okay.
Like
That's
early
so OG Bape.
OG Bape,
Yeah, OG
man,
Bape.
OG Bape. And I've always really enjoyed like the colors, like, the camouflage colors. Like, I've always just like been really into that. So that started to reflect a lot onto my work. So my work started to become more colorful. I started painting with like brighter colors, and even seeing like artists like Cause and everything at that time when I was in like high school. I was always using like tons of bright colors in my work until I started to shift a little bit and started using oil paints and started getting a little more traditional with the work. So
Yeah, I think street culture has a way of affecting, at least for our generation, right? We talked about like 80s being crack epidemic and then shifting to the 90s and
right.
everything that like we don't even sometimes part of the Black experience is not ever even realize you're being influenced by your environment. And in some cases even being raised by your environment. So it's absolutely been an influence on how I see retail, my perspective on how we want to take consumers on journey, and even how I collect, right? Because it's about nostalgic things that just connect to like me as a person and like kind of just my journey growing up, just like how it connects to culture, and it helps excite me. Because if I can't get excited about something, then I guess I'm not that interested. And when you start to look at new brands or old brands, you think of somebody like Hiroshi and how people can continue to get excited about simplicity. I think when you're from a small city, you kind of wear. And I'm from a small city and a small neighborhood, so you always are the underdog. So I'm very much, I live with this chip on my shoulder, and I'm used to it. So living in a small city and knowing that you have to be local but think global, I think it's become kind of the mantra for the world now, right? Years ago it was always about New York and LA, and I think a lot of people still think that's true, but I think people like ourselves have showed how important it is to be comfortable where you are and being able to grow where you are in a meaningful way. And for me, it's super exciting to be able to be in Detroit and work on some of the things we're working on here, and to see you get here and coming from Ohio and now like just busted onto the scene and doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, used to be like you have to go to like New York, LA, all those places, and those are great places to go to. Like you should definitely go to those places. If you're an artist, you need to go to those places to go to museums. You need to broaden your horizon. But I also think it's a great thing to have a studio somewhere kind of secluded where you can be really, and I don't mean like secluded as in like there's nobody around here, but it's definitely versus a lot of the other cities, it's smaller, but you get that sense of like, oh, this, I want to paint here, I want to make the work here, and you get sort of that like, you can still have your studio visits, but it's not like that like, tussle of the city too much. You can be inspired, and you can be inspired by different things too. Like for me, coming out to Detroit, I was in Toledo, Ohio. That's where my last studio was, and Toledo is great, but it's very small. Coming up to Detroit, for me, I started to really like see, a huge like influence. Like I started to see like the city, the area, the people. It's been a huge influence.
Yeah, the grass is greener where you water it. I
Right.
think tons of people run to those places. So essentially, you got a ton of people watering the grass.
Right.
If you don't tend to the lawn where you are, then you always think the grass is greener. And in our cases, I think that the grass can be very green where we're at, and we can influence the world from the places where we are.
Definitely.
And like once again, I think from a retail perspective, it gets interesting because, like, if you think about what happened with Atlanta years ago, 15 years ago, people didn't care about Atlanta the way they do now. Atlanta, pretty much at this point, owns the sound of the world. Right? It's the theme song to the world, right? So you start to look at Charlotte and Detroit and some of these other markets that aren't DC and LA, and I think there's a huge opportunity for the people there to show them that culture can live, exist, and thrive anywhere.
No, definitely, and it's also, you know, I mean, at least for me, I'm saving money. I'm saving money because it's like I mean, my paintings, I use a lot of oil paint, and I don't know, like most people know, but oil paint is super expensive, and I've been able to like, I mean, I've been literally like pouring this paint out, mixing it in jars, and trying to make it as versatile as I can, and being here in Detroit actually helps me be able to kind of achieve what I want my paintings to look like. If I was in an area where I was kind of like, all right, I gotta really like, save my money, go get like 5 jobs or something like that, and it wouldn't have worked out as much. But here, it's like it works out for me. So like you just said, like the grass is greener. It's like you have to find that spot that works for you, even if it's not necessarily what other people might think, and
that's the emphasis, finding what works for you,
right,
and being comfortable building a community where you are.
Exactly, and I think that's very powerful. That's a very powerful thing, and I want to be a part of that. That's one of the reasons why I came here, is like I want to be a part of that building up that community.
For me, my journey in art is just about it's about me really wanting to feel and connect to my space, right? And it's curating the soundtrack of your life, right? And how you exist in space. And for me, like, because Jamie's here, it's so specific to Jamie, and engaging with him is kind of like we're laughing because he's telling me the stories of his life, and he's saying that he isn't painting to help others. He's painting to heal himself, right? So when you live this certain journey, and as a collector, right, I'm living to heal myself. And when you start to talk about the Black story and the Black journey, like our journey, just as we exist in America in certain pockets and places, and the similarities between where he's from in Louisiana and where I'm from in Pittsburgh, and some of the tragedies we've had in life, but we've had to endure and live through. And now you live in the world and you start to heal yourself. And I guess my journey through art, what I see in Pat's work and what I see in Nina's work and what I see in your work, is I see parts of my life and patches of my life and places that are really familiar, right? And people that are really familiar, and things that connect to who I was, but also can inspire who I want to be. So for me, when I look at like Henry Taylor's work, which I love, you start to think like, wow, it takes you to a place, at least it takes me to a place, that may be somewhere different than where one of Nina's pieces or Jamie's piece takes me, but the feeling is still euphoric, and they all inspire me and invoke an emotion. And the most important thing is that emotion for me, right? In always having, trying to have all the spaces around me that I need to participate as a part of everyday life, have feeling to kind of push me along. I think that is my secret sauce.
Right.
Because if I'm around people who push me and inspire me, and a lot of times I can't be, if my spaces activate me, it helps me move forward, and it helps move me along.
Right. I mean, that's the one thing that when I paint, I really think about, okay, I want these pieces to be in homes. You just talked about activating, your space activating you. That's what I really like for my works to kind of do, is to be in an actual, home, and actually, somebody being able to look at it. And, it might change their perspective different days, and at least that's how it feels with the art that I have in my home too. I'll be like looking at it and I'll be like, I might see something new in it, and it's like, you'll be like, oh, I never really noticed that before, or, you might have like a certain mood to it, but that's a lot of what I'm doing when I'm painting is it's like, I'm painting for me, but I'm also knowingly know that these works are going to homes or they're going to, different places. And my hope is that for when people kind of see it, they kind of take their own interpretation of it. It's not necessarily something that has to be, one interpretation. It can be multiple, which is one of the reasons why it's like, I paint black people, but I also will be painting white people or, Asian people, anybody.
Sure.
And just have people sit for me. And, it just becomes sort of this, like, I always think a lot about, like, Alice Neal and how there's, like, a sort of a humanistic, like, quality to the work. Like, it's just, like, everybody's becoming a part of it. So that's one of the reasons, while I'll have people sit for me or I'll have those conversations with people. And yeah, I think that's what I really want the work to kind of do in a way, is like when it's in somebody's home, like they get to take that interpretation, or if it's in a museum or something. So yeah, definitely.
When I think about young artists, we talked about at lunch, we talked a lot about what is our responsibility now as we become leaders in our industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
You start your industry and you want to find a place and you want to carve out your spot, right? And now that I think I can say I've carved a spot out in a world in my industry, in a spot in the world where I understand what my journey is about. As I collect and support artists, for me, like I said, we're informing the future on what 2021 was about, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, like supporting like young artists and supporting youth culture and supporting like younger people, as someone is entering their 40s, I can't be 20 in 2021, right? Mm-hmm. So I need to learn from those people. And I think it's important that the world understands what those artists' purpose will be in 2060, right? Like if we don't support young artists, we're not giving them a chance to get their point of view in the world, right? If I've been able to build a position in the world, it's only because I've been a participant of our culture. So now I need to pay that forward, right? By not just, obviously I don't discriminate against established artists, right? But for me, connecting with young artists is about making sure that like the world stays fresh, and I even keep my palette clean, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy to fall in love with Nina and Nicolene and Henry Taylor and all these established artists, right? Yeah. It's a lot more refreshing and inspiring when you get to see new perspectives and takes on the world or previous work and previous artists, or the point of view of a 20-year-old in 2021 with the things that are happening today, which are very different than it even was 5 years ago.
Right. And I think too, when you're supporting younger artists, and it's not even just like younger artists too, it's just like our artists who, like, for example, I went to school, but I'm not necessarily sure whether or not I want to go get my master's. I've just kind of been like, well, I just want to paint, Yeah. And I think that drive to make work and paint, I think a lot of times when you have that drive and you're, constantly making work or constantly researching as an artist, that research, that work gets noticed, and I think even if you don't have everything yet, you don't have the, like at least for me in painting, like I'll be like, oh, this isn't right yet, or I have to, figure this out a little bit more. There's some artists like that, but it's just like once there gets to a point, they start going like, oh, I'm making enough work that people are now kind of recognizing that I'm putting that hard work in, and that I'm like, researching constantly every day. So yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely important to support artists that are, constantly doing that, and just liking the work too.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
one of the biggest
Like
things.
engaging
Like,
with work.
yeah, engaging with, like, if you see something, like, even if it's like, you're walking down the street and somebody's just like painting or something like that, and if that work speaks to you and you're like, I want to buy this. I guess, with my body of work that I'm actually making right now is I'm going kind of digging in the crate of like my family photos and not really making portraits or, I'm making portraits and figurative works, but I'm not necessarily making them to match exactly what I'm finding in the photographs. I'm taking sort of that essence, the poses, the different things in the photograph, because my mom's white and my dad's black, and I don't really have like a great relationship with my father, so I don't really see that side of the family very much. But I have all these like photos in an album, and I'm like, why don't I just paint these? And I just started like taking them and painting them, trying to like maybe figure out my family through the works.
Yeah, I think family experience for me has been incredibly important too, because it's, for right or for wrong, it's your journey,
Right.
right? Like it's actually, it's the blood that runs through you, right? So your connection to it is inevitable, and your feelings around it shift, because I think even if you've had the best life, there's things that excite you, and then there's things you need to heal from, right? And embracing that journey and telling that part of your story is important.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think, like you just said too, it's like healing too, in a way. Like, even if I don't have like the best relationship with, one side of the family, in some ways I can look at these photos and kind of like heal from that and kind of, paint these photos.
And connect and understand
connect,
it.
yeah.
Even if there's not the connection, it's still your blood.
Absolutely.
Right, and there's still connectivity through you.
Absolutely.